Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for all coming to our event today. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Mary Love. I work over in the STEM Center as an instructional assistant. And today we have an excellent panel of women in honor of Women's History Month. So during this panel, our panelists will be discussing a little bit about their experiences as women in the STEM fields, but also about how they're using their expertise and experiences to create products, programs, or apps that are life-changing. So I wanted this discussion to not just be about the struggles that exist for women in STEM, but I also wanted our three women to share with you how they are combining their compassion, passion, and leveraging STEM and tech and their influence for good. So with that, I'm going to have our panelists introduce themselves. So if you want to just say your name, where you work, a little bit about what you do, maybe where you went to school. Yeah, and then you want to start?
Sure. Good afternoon. I was about to say good morning. My name is Danielle Rose, and I'm the Chief Programs Officer at SMASH, which is, or what's formerly known as Level Playing Field Institute. And so we're the education focus area of the KPOR Center, and we are really working to prepare young people, underrepresented people of color, for STEM, and not just to pursue, but persist and ultimately excel in that program, in that particular field, while also encouraging our young people to have a sense of social awareness, responsibility, and we really push that, encourage that way of thinking as it relates to how they approach their education and ultimately their careers. So that's a little bit about our program. I oversee all of our programs. We have now 7 across this country. We are in California here at UC Berkeley, which is where the program was founded. And we've since expanded to Stanford, UC Davis, UCLA, Morehouse in Atlanta, Wayne State in Detroit, Wharton at the University of Pennsylvania, and I think I'm missing one. I feel like, oh, I'm sorry, we're now launching this summer actually in Chicago at the Illinois Institute of Technology. So, and my phone is on vibrate, please excuse me. So we basically work with high school students the summer after they start their freshman year, and we work with them to and through high school, and then now even as they are transitioning into college. And so it's a STEM intensive college preparatory program where the students reside on these various campuses for 5 weeks for 3 years. And then during the academic year, they actually have various Saturday programming to ensure the continuity of what they've learned during the summer. So that's a little bit about SMASH. As it relates to myself, I am Berkeley born, Oakland raised. Haven't lived here. I just moved back, not just, but 5 years ago after being away for about 20 years, where I pursued my undergrad and graduate studies in math and mechanical engineering at Spelman College in Atlanta and also Georgia Tech. And then I did my first career was actually in the energy space. And then I left corporate and transitioned to the education space in about 2010. So coming up on my 10-year anniversary of redeeming myself, if you will. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. Looking forward to talking with you all and learning about what you may be interested in, and any questions that I can answer, happy to do so.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sargun Kaur, and I'm a Bay native. Grew up in Fremont, and then went to college at Berkeley. Pursued computer science, which was a journey in and of itself of how I got through it, why I chose that major. We'll talk about it. After that, I joined Google as a software engineer. I worked on the Google Maps backend team. And then I worked on Google Photos, the Android side, for 2 years. And then last year, actually pitched a startup to Google's incubator, got funded. So I've been working on that and growing the product and my team since then. So I'm the CEO and co-founder of Byteboard. It's funded through Google's incubator called Area 120. What Byteboard really was solving or is working to fix technical interviews across the industry. So for those of you pursuing computer science or pursuing technical careers, you might have heard of, Cracking the Coding Interview, that book. It's kind of like a manual that you have to study of like algorithms and data structures and so forth. But the way that the technical interview process works today allows for a lot of subjectivity and a lot of bias to come into the system. And the questions that we ask in our technical interviews are oftentimes some things that like you have to study months for, even if you're an engineer. Like today, as a fairly strong performing software engineer at Google, if you asked me to go interview at Facebook or Apple or whatever that might be, I'd tell you, like, give me a month, give me 2 months to study. And in your head, you're like, well, aren't you an engineer? Like, aren't you, like, working as an engineer every day? Like, why can't you just go interview and showcase your skills, which is what you would think you should be able to do. But the interview is something that you have to practice, and it's a whole other set of skills that oftentimes disproportionately affects individuals that don't have that kind of time, that don't have those resources. There are certain elite schools that offer, elite colleges that offer technical interview courses to their students. Not every school across the country has those courses or has those professors. So overall, I heard a ton of different stories from folks who said they had so much anxiety around the technical interview process, or they couldn't get through it, or they didn't have the right resources. I myself have sat on hiring committees at Google. I've been an interviewer at Google and both an interviewee as well. So I've seen kind of the entire process end to end. And there's so many stories of it not being, it being like a performative thing, right? Like you have to get into a room and like showcase and talk in front of a whiteboard and demonstrate your skills. And there's so much anxiety in that process. So we're creating an interview that's more effective, that's more holistic and representative of what you would be doing on the job as an engineer. So it's a project-based interview. We can talk about it. We're creating an interview that's more efficient. So it saves engineering's time in terms of doing the interviews, but also saves candidates time when you're interviewing for so many different companies. And lastly, most importantly, we're trying to create an interview that's equitable, that's a fair and positive experience for everyone to showcase and demonstrate their skills, regardless of the background or the schooling that they came from. Yeah.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sarahi Espinoza Salamanca. I am founder and CEO of Dreamers Roadmap. It's a free national mobile app where we help undocumented students across the country find scholarships to go to college. So I was born in Lázaro Cárdenas, Michoacán, Mexico, and immigrated to this country when I was 4 years old. I kind of did the whole educational route like every other child in this country. But everything changed for me my senior year of high school. When I went to my counselor and I told her the situation that I was in and found out that I wasn't eligible for financial aid because of the status that I was in. And she told me that students like me couldn't go to college. So I think for me that was a huge turning point because I'm the youngest of 11 children, the first one in my family to try to pursue a college education. So if you guys are first generation, you know exactly what I'm talking about, and how difficult it is to not have anyone at home or in your family that can help you through that process, and how daunting that could be to even think that you're good enough or prepared enough to even pursue a college education. After graduating from high school and not having a clear path to college, I left Los Angeles, where I went to high school, came back to the Bay Area, and it wasn't until I came back that a lady from my church actually told me about something called AB 540. And that's when I started looking into other opportunities through the state provided to undocumented students for financial support. Was able to get myself through college. I did community college, and then I went off to Stanford. And I was able to launch Dreamers Roadmap thanks to a national competition where they were asking exactly that, like how could we solve problems in our community using technology? And prior to this, I had never even thought of like me ever being involved with technology, like ever. One, because I think until I went to college, I knew what STEM was. And two, because when you look at technology or anything, even to this day, and it's slightly changing now, you hardly see any people of color, and women even less. So it was very, very terrifying to even have the guts or the courage to apply to this competition. Thankfully, I applied. I won first place in the country and was able to get the funding to build this tool that has helped more than 30,000 people across the country get into college.
Great. Thank you all. Cool. So my first question for you, and you kind of touched on it already, but what made you interested in the tech or the STEM space, and what motivated you to keep going even when you felt like there was barriers or struggles in the way? Does anyone want to start?
Oh, should I just go on? Okay.
Sure. Yeah, you can go on.
Okay. Okay. So what inspired me kind of to do it? I think despite the fact that I was terrified to go in because there was nobody that looked like me, that also was my inspiration to go into the field. Again, because growing up, I didn't really have a lot of people of color or women of color that I could look up to that had these like amazing careers. And like I think I hadn't really met anyone that was an immigrant Mexican woman that had a tech CEO position. So I think for me, that was one of my motivators, that there wasn't people like me in these positions, and I wanted to be in that position to inspire younger generations and other women of color in my community, that they could too be founders and CEOs of their own tech companies. And I think for me, once I started getting involved with technology, what really inspired me to continue to pursue this, despite the fact that there's still, I think to this day, many times where I want to give up, is the impact that we're making in people's lives and how technology could really solve so many problems in our communities. And we are the people that should be solving them because we're the ones that have gone through them. But very, very, very little times do they give us the opportunity to actually express those ideas. So I'm so grateful for the Voto Latino Innovators Challenge that gave us that opportunity. And I'm always constantly on the lookout for opportunities like that to share with our audience and like people around me and in my community, because I think that we are all capable and smart enough to build companies. We just need to have the people who have these, I guess, at the end of the day, it's the money, right? That are willing to give us that resource and that capital to say, hey, I believe in you. Like, what have you gone through in your life that you would like to fix? I'm giving you the money to build it, right? So that's what I like to think to myself. Like, if you had all the money in the world, if you could solve anything in the world or in your community, what would it be? And just write it down. Like, start thinking about it, start brainstorming it, because you'll, like, I think opportunities like that come when you least expect it. And when they do, you'll be prepared, right? So I'm a big fan of like being prepared for the opportunity. And if you're not prepared when an opportunity shows up, then that might have been your only shot. So write it down. Y'all are capable enough and smart enough. Y'all have gone through so much as people of color in community college. I know what it's like, and I know what you have been through because I was there. And even in that process, there's so many things that I wish I could fix. And y'all have the capability to do that through technology.
One thing I would say, like, you talk about money, right? Like, we need to find access to people with money to, like, fund our ideas. And that's something that I often think about, too, that venture capital and, like, that space that awards money and kind of, like, bets on startups and bets on ideas is, like, even, like, it's even harder. It's, like, even more full of, like, white men, right? Yep. So the fact that, like, when you're in your startup is successful, grows and gets bigger, like, you kind of like going up and like having access to money, you get to make those ideas, you get to make those bets on those startups, on y'all, right? Mm-hmm. That currently we're fighting for. Currently, because we're women CEOs or we're female CEOs or we're women of color CEOs, when we go to those venture capitalists, they often don't believe in our ideas, or we have to like kind of like create opportunities for ourselves and work through barriers that oftentimes a lot of the men in the community don't, or a lot of the white men in the community don't. So you end up seeing startups or ideas that get funded are kind of focusing on a very narrow lens because that's their perspective. So to get access to that kind of barrier or that kind of tier, that's one of the things that also encourages me to like keep working on what I'm working on. but also like computer science, at least for me, what I kept telling myself was like, I don't just have to be an engineer, right? I don't just have to be like working to like fix a feature in this one thing. I had a struggle with like kind of like going through college. I ended up choosing computer science as a junior when I was in college, so pretty late. And by that time, everyone in my class of like 1,000 students, 90% plus being men, were just, it seemed like to me, it felt like to me that they had been coding since like they were 5, right? They got the answers really quick. They like knew what algorithm to work. They never had to debug their code. And I would spend days just like working through an algorithm, working through debugging code and be like, this is not for me. Clearly everyone else gets it. And that a lot of it had to do with not having like the support in place, or seeing folks that like look like me or were like, didn't have the resource or didn't grow up like thinking they were going to become engineers. So one of the reasons I stuck through it was like, I knew I loved problem solving. I like loved actually doing it when it worked. Like when your code works, it's like such a euphoric feeling. And B, like I was like, I can use this foundational computer science knowledge and apply it to anything. As our world grows to become more and more dependent on technology, no matter what field that we're in, I knew that like that foundation would be really helpful for me. One of the things I will add is I like really sought out mentors, and that's pretty late in the game. Once I got to Google, I sought out mentors that were women of color and actually men, because they have access to opportunities that oftentimes like I don't have access to or I didn't know of, to help support me, and that's like been a really, really helpful for me to stick through it, knowing that like it's not just in my head, that I'm not just like the only one feeling like an imposter. Like oftentimes 99% of the community around us is too, and to be able to talk through that was really helpful for me.
Cool. Do you want
I'll try and keep it a little brief in terms of my journey. So I started the STEM journey in 6th grade. I was in Mesa. Not sure if folks are familiar with Mesa. And I was at Cal Berkeley. And my mother had put me into Mesa because I was just always tinkering at home. If something broke, I wanted to understand why and how to fix it. So something as simple as like the belt on the vacuum, like what happened? So I would dismantle the vacuum and put it back together, fix it. And so that's kind of, I'm now like Mr. Fix-It or Miss Fix-It at my mom's house as a result. But, nonetheless, I started this journey very early on and continued with Mesa Pre-College Academy. Then I was awarded a NASA scholarship full ride for undergrad, and then Ford Motor actually sponsored my graduate school programming as well. So I was in these different fields and interned at Jet Propulsion Laboratory a few summers, was at Ford Motor for a few summers, and along the way, what really kept me going was truly the support of my sisters, my Spelman sisters. We were all on this journey together. We came in as a cohort. We were Y scholars, women in science and engineering, and that really was, to know that there were others along this path. Even when I was in spaces where I did not see myself, it absolutely helped me to keep going. And so I think community and having support is really critical. One thing that, along my way and what ultimately, I won't say ultimately, but absolutely informed my decision to transition out of corporate America and go into the education space was that I took this path a little blindly. All I knew, the message that I kept being bombarded with was, if you get an engineering degree, you can write your own ticket. Just get an engineering degree. There was this there's been a few waves of pushing, at the time, the language was minorities. If you're a minority, you got an engineering degree, you're good. And so I pursued that path. And to your point earlier, Sargun's point around having a computer science degree and then recognizing, though, I don't have to be just a computer scientist. Like, there are so many different avenues to pursue. That was the understanding with engineering. And that's actually what ended up playing out for me. Having that foundation and just in terms of that training of, critical analysis and really problem solving in a manner that was efficient and basically how do you optimize different pathways to get to whatever solution you're trying to solve for, I think was something that really afforded me these different opportunities, and being a woman of color. But when I transitioned, one of the reasons why I transitioned into education and with SMASH in particular was we can't do this blindly. I don't want to just tell our young people, get a degree in CS, and just because you have to, you need to. I really want young people in particular, to travel this path of understanding why they are pursuing engineering, why they are pursuing math, why they're pursuing computer science, and be able to marry it with whatever your passions are, whatever you tend to gravitate towards just naturally. How can STEM actually play a role in whatever it is you really enjoy, what brings you joy? Because that's ultimately what's going to keep you going along a journey that's not necessarily occupied with people that look like you or may come from the backgrounds that you come from. So that's what's charged me this second go-round of my career in education, is to try to adjust what was done for me in a way that I think could have just that much greater of impact, that people stay in whatever realm of STEM they decide to pursue.
Cool. Thank you all. So I know some of you talked about finding mentors or connecting with your sisters. So how do you go about finding allies or resources or people that can help you, support you along the way in your jobs and your careers and personal life?
Okay. I think, one, it's a matter of even coming to events like this, right? I think when you start to commune and see that there are other people that are on this journey, just starting by having a conversation, and or even with us here connecting with folks that are on panels or just in different spaces that they're at least convening for the purpose of STEM equity, and I think that's one way that you can go about communing and creating a network. I think there's also just being fearless in the sense of, if you read about somebody online, I didn't have the World Wide Web when I was coming up. It's just now 30 years old, so I'm beyond that. And so that was, I didn't necessarily have that vehicle to really explore and see, well, who's out there. And it's about cold, not calling necessarily, because I don't think folks use the phone to call anymore too much, but maybe it's a matter of tweeting at somebody, or maybe it's sending them on LinkedIn a message. Or LinkedIn is really good too, in the sense that you can see who you might be connected to, and using those folks to actually, or let me not say use, but leveraging those folks to form an introduction for you. And I think that's another way to start to grow your network. I wasn't the best at it when I was in the workplace. I ended up having champions kind of come to me. And that's one thing, tokenization is real, right, in corporate America, and you can leverage that, to your own benefit. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Folks came to me because I was definitely, I checked boxes. I was a woman. I was a Black woman. I was a Black woman with multiple degrees in engineering and math. And so, and I worked hard. And so when you show that and you have this background, folks will come to you as well. And you should be open and receptive to that approach and seeing how folks, what they are up to. Sometimes it's for their own kind of checking the box of, well, I'm giving back. Let them give back and let them help you. I would say that is another route to go as well. And I want to let my co-panelists talk more about what their journeys are.
I think you covered most of it, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, cool. Great. Do you ever feel like you had to choose between like a strictly STEM or tech career and giving back to your community? And how can our students do both for when they graduate and go into the workforce?
I think just one more thing that I'd like to touch back on, like the mentors thing, is to not be afraid to ask for help. I'm still getting better at that. Like I do kind of do the cold calling of like people that I see. I'm like, ooh, like that person's like so dope. Like let me find them on LinkedIn real quick, and I send them a message. They reply. Like they will reply. They are human. Also, I think a lot of times we think like, oh, they're so far out. Like I can't even touch them. But they're actually human. They're really nice. So don't be afraid to reach out to those people, and don't be afraid to ask for help. And I think for me, that's what has helped me find the right people in my network that have supported me. Being vulnerable on what it is you really need has given me a very clear path and has helped these people who are super busy but also human have a direct answer for me whenever it is that I need it. So also having that in mind, right? Like reach out, but reach out with an ask to have them help you the best that they can. And then as far as the question, I think for me, it just, I might have gotten lucky because it just came together, right? Like, I think for me, it wasn't that I had to choose my community or tech. They merged. And I think it was all based on my personal experience, right? That's what I was talking about before. Like, my personal experience was what inspired me to be able to build a tool to serve others just like me in my community that were coming after me. Because being in that situation and feeling like as terrible as I did my senior year and thinking that I really wasn't good enough or thinking that this counselor was right, that people like me couldn't go, was terrible. And I'm like, how many other people are going through the same thing? And when it was happening to me, honestly, I'm like, I'm probably the only person in the country who's going through this, because that was back in 2008 when it wasn't like I'm undocumented and afraid movement, not yet. So it was very isolating. But I think after that, it was like there's 65,000 students a year in the same situation. And I think when I started doing my research and finding these numbers and knowing that there were so many other people in the same situation, I'm like, I have to do something. And that's how I think both worlds merged for me. And I've just been very fortunate to be able to give back to the community that I come from.
That's something I definitely struggled with when I first started my career. I joined at Google, and like the first 2 years, I was just like, would go into work, I'd like work on my team, work on the feature, like code all day, and then go home. And I realized like how burnt out I was getting, just like being so isolated in that work and that community and that, like the folks in my team were great, but like just in that kind of very small or particular narrative and conversation. And so I started trying to see like what other groups or things I could join. And Google's like a campus, like as many organizations you probably have here, there's the same number of organizations like at Google. It's like a college campus. You'll have a ukulele club. You'll have like a woman group. Like, there's just so many different groups. So I tried to start reaching out and kind of just joining in on meetings and going to things like that. And even on my particular team, we started putting together like a diversity council. We started kind of putting together some more leadership opportunities to understand like how's the culture on our team doing, how are things like that. And I started getting more involved there, where I was still doing my day-to-day work as I was, but I was interacting in different kind of conversations that really empowered me or like made me feel like I was more than just an engineer on the team. And that was really important to me. Having like volunteered with the Black Googlers Network or like volunteered with the Asian Googlers Network, like done events with them, done a ton of panels, had mentors, had mentees, worked at schools, worked at universities, did events there across the country. That's what really excited me and what like helped me do better even at the work that I was like doing as an engineer because I was more passionate about it and less burnt out. And that led into, me gaining leadership opportunities, me gaining the confidence in the work that I did, in showing up more at meetings and like calling out or like saying things and speaking up, which led to, thinking about the startup. I went to a hackathon. That's where I met my co-founder. And these are all things I wouldn't have done if I was burnt out or if I was only like singularly focused on the work that I was doing. And I was able to like leverage the space and the utilities at Google to really drive this mission and this problem that I saw in the community, and use Google's space and Google's branding to now like work on the startup and integrate that together. So bottom line, I think like as long as you keep that passion and like that understanding, like that's what fulfills you, and drive towards it. It might not happen automatically, but there's always like steps that you can take to work towards either building the skills that eventually you'll be able to work on your passion full time, or work on like creating a community or leveraging a space or company or tool or money, to put that together eventually. And it took me 5 years, but I love the work that I do now and the team that I've built now because I love working with them. The conversations that we have are so empowering, and I know the work that we're doing is important.
Great, thank you. Cool. Do any of you think of any of like the most pressing issues that we can address with technology or from the STEM fields, or can you think of anything that off the top of your head? Anything you want to work on?
I think there's so much to be done. I constantly think about, there's a lot of commercial apps, right? There's a lot of social apps, there's a lot of commercial apps, but we've yet to see a breakthrough in terms of two particular fields that are like closely like passionate for me are healthcare and education. There's so much to be done there. Not a lot of venture funding has gone into it. Only lately have we started seeing like more female venture capitalists fund female health-related products, right? There's a whole, like, that kind of sector hasn't been innovated in like, decades. And there's so much that can be done there that we're only beginning to see the light of. So I'm really excited to see how technology can integrate and fix so many problems, or at least, like, improve and help kind of like show light and to situations that particularly impact that community.
Yeah, I think on that note, the reason why we decided at Dreamers Roadmap to become a nonprofit app was for that particular reason, right? That there's like very few to like no VC funding for apps that are solving problems, which is ridiculous. Like you would think like, oh, there'd be so many people wanting to solve problems through technology, but there isn't. And just recently, this is something that if you guys are interested in looking into something of that nature, look into Fast Forward. Fast Forward is an accelerator that's based here in the Bay Area who are accepting, they accept cohorts. I think they did like 10 last year. I was part of it. So they accept nonprofit apps. So basically, if you have an idea for an app that's going to solve a problem and you have a team, you could submit your application. And if you get accepted, you get $25,000. And you go through their whole cohort for the fall. And throughout the fall, you're going to have these mentors from various tech companies who you'll meet and then use to leverage their networks to get more support for your project. And on demo day, you basically pitch your idea to a room full of very wealthy people, some VC people, but a lot of people who are willing to donate to projects like those. So you get a lot of funding that way. So yes, it's a lot harder, but the opportunity is there if you guys do want to get into that. Like, I'd love to talk to you guys after more about it. But yeah, it's really challenging, and I think our community needs to be able to see more opportunities in those spaces because there's so much need in that.
Yeah, I'll just add, so I was at South by Southwest last week, and I was attending a panel around diversity in tech, and one of the founders of a site called I Love Black people, I think it is, .com. And it's essentially like a present day green book, if anybody is familiar with green book. And so it's a way that folks of color can travel in this country and even beyond in a way and be able to go and frequent places and spaces that are actually welcoming to them. And so one thing, though, he had asked this question around, he more so made a comment, and he was talking about how, you know, he remembers as a younger person in Brooklyn having a struggle to catch a cab. And in present day, that's still an issue where folks still take cabs, right? But Uber is a solution for that type of discrimination that would occur on an ongoing basis. And so, but that a person of color did not discover or found Uber. But that is the type of thinking that I think we need to see more of amongst Black and brown communities. And so I'm more so thinking about what are the issues that are plaguing us. I mean, what do you see on a day-to-day basis that frustrates you? And looking and thinking about, okay, how could I leverage technology to actually solve for this? That could in turn then be able to serve a much broader swath of folks, but it's kind of getting back to those roots of for us, by us, right? And I think that's something that is resurging in a way, and that is something that we really double down and emphasize at Smash when working with our young people, is that it's not just about getting this degree, making a lot of money. It is about it, though, let's be clear, but it's also thinking about how can you leverage these skills gained in a way that's going to help your community, be it local, national, and or global. And so I think, you know, be it food justice, housing, healthcare is significant. Women's healthcare is also in dire need of attention. And even from a research standpoint, a lot of our ailments have been around for quite some time, but it's just not a priority. So really thinking about who is not a priority in this country and thinking about what are the problems that they face because they're not a priority, and then using STEM to solve for that.
Thank you all. I'm going to ask one more question because I know students might have class at 1, and I want to give them a chance to ask questions as well. But just really quick, what's one piece of advice you would like to give to our students in their education or in their future, in their jobs, and stuff like that? So.
I'll say one thing. You absolutely belong. You belong in any space that you occupy, and you have every right to make a difference. And it takes work, though. So it's not entitlement, but it's absolutely, you're more than capable. And so I want to walk away with knowing that I shared that with you all, and hopefully it resonates as you move along this journey.
To follow on that, I'd say use your identity as your strength. Where you come from, you're a great example of this. Use that to your advantage, not to your disadvantage. And in particular, the ideas that you come up with are very particular in a way that like the rest of the community, or the majority community in tech present day, hasn't even thought of them and will likely not because of their narrow perspective. So you have that unique opportunity that they don't, to pursue something and make it big, make it huge, because there's a lot of us. And if we look at it globally, you want to build products globally, like there's not just white people, there's not just men globally. So you have a big population that you can change lives, or your ideas can impact. So always think about, hey, like where I came from, what are the things that impacted me, how can I improve it? Because I have the stage to make this really big.
I think for me is to identify those people that truly uplift you in your lowest moments. Because if you are thinking of the tech route, being a person of color, or even the entrepreneur route, it's going to be really challenging, but it is worth it. it is worth it. But I think, yeah, because of how challenging it is, you're gonna need those people in your life to almost daily remind you that you do belong, that you are worth it, and that you could achieve whatever it is that you're trying to achieve.
Cool, thanks. So now I want to open it up to Q&A with all of you. Does anyone have any questions for our panelists? Yeah? Oh, Gabe.
So there's a roaming microphone, so because we want to record the questions also.
How are you guys doing? Thanks a lot for being here today and inspiring the women in engineering. Is there any specific conferences or any specific programs out there that women in engineering could actually participate in outside of school?
There's a bunch. You actually live in the mecca of like tech conferences, I think. But the one that's coming up is Cloud 19, an Apple Developers Conference. So yeah, I can probably get you into Cloud 19. You can reach out to me and I can give you some information on that. But yeah, like literally if you just Google tech conferences, you'll see a whole list of them, like on a year calendar filled. Yeah.
Yeah, when I was a student, I got a scholarship to go to Grace Hopper, which is probably one that most of you have heard of. But it's a huge, huge conference. It's the biggest women in computing conference in the world. It's happening in Houston later this year in October. I think it's particularly really helpful for students because every company out there is going to have a booth there, and you have access to all of them. That's how I got my first internship. And so I would definitely recommend that. But there's also smaller conferences like in the Bay. But there's always like companies that are doing scholarships for these conferences as well. So look out for that.
Yeah, definitely Grace Hopper. We took a cohort of our alum this past year, and that proved to be really beneficial. And we were in partnership with the Anita Borg Institute, who runs the actual conference. And so to your point around scholarships, I know that when you first, at initial glance, it may be daunting, right, because of the price tag that's associated with a lot of these large conferences. But there are, more often than not, different ways to go about getting financial support to attend. Tapia is another one that's very much focused around people of color in particular. And so that's another conference that I would recommend folks looking into. Afrotech is another conference that's actually going to be hosted in Oakland this year, where it's historically been over in San Francisco. So that's another venue. And there's a host of numerous conferences happening.
I think I saw, does someone have their hand up over here? No. Yeah.
I just was wondering if you could all repeat your names again clearly and where you're affiliated. Thank you.
Sure. So Danielle Rose, and I am with SMASH, and smash.org is the website. I can be found on there, and my email is just danielle@smash.org.
Sargun Kaur, I'm an engineer, but also the CEO and founder of Byteboard, funded through Google's incubator called Area 120.
My name is Sarahi Espinoza Salamanca, but my email is sarahi@dreamersroadmap.org, founder and CEO of Dreamers Roadmap.
And my email is sargun@google.
Cool. Do we have, yeah.
My name's Katie Messina Silva. I'm one of the counselors here at Chabot. I'm a STEM counselor and also a counselor in the Dream Center. And so I just wanted to share two resources. We do have STEM counseling appointments available. I have some referral slips here. You can come and grab one from me before you go if you want to come and talk to a counselor about setting up a STEM ed plan. So if you're a STEM student and you need a little extra help and support in figuring out your classes, making a plan, talking about transfer, that's a great thing to do. And then also we have our Dream Resource Center located over in El Centro. It's just a resource center for undocumented students. I'm one of the counselors that works in there too. And so we just have a lot of resources and support here at Chabot, and we really want to encourage students to come and take advantage of those supports, because that support starts here while you're students. I know that they talked a lot about finding that support in their careers, and so I just want to let everyone know that there's support here as you guys are moving forward in your journey towards your careers as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. And I also have the forms in the STEM Center, so if you need one in the future, you can come grab them for me. Cool. Do we have any other questions for our panelists? Yeah.
Being a minority in technology and seeing how there's a disparity in just classrooms, like in my computer science class, it's almost like 45 and there's only 3 women. So it's kind of scary going into a workforce where people keep saying the men are dominant over it. So what keeps you going through that? And if you've ever been through obstacles where they treated you differently, what did you do?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay. I can't speak to computer science in particular, but I definitely, my classes at Georgia Tech, I was one of maybe 3 or 4 in that same kind of ratio. And I think coming from Spelman, an all-women's institute, really helped ground me in a way that I felt rather empowered and invincible of sorts. I took a lot of knocks, but I kept pushing through, and I think that really came from my community outside of what was happening in the classroom. Also really took the opportunity to tap into my TAs, tapped into the professors themselves. Now they're not all going to be welcoming, but you never know until you try. And so that was something that I really had to push myself on, because again, I'm an introvert. I don't really like, trying to step out there and talk to strangers. But definitely that was something that I had to do in order to really thrive in these spaces where there weren't a lot of folks like me. The workplace is a bit of a different animal. Also grew very accustomed to not working with just all men, but British men. And that's a little different, culturally speaking. And so, it was, I heard a lot, I received a lot of comments, microaggressions, some macro, and really finding those different champions in that space was critical for me. That may not be in my direct department or in my direct line. In fact, it's more ideal that you find somebody outside of your direct line of management to really be able to talk to and confide in as things get challenging. And I know there's ERGs now in a lot of the spaces. We did at BP have some ERGs, and just I was fortunate enough to be able to find different folks of color that could really help walk me through those environments and those experiences.
I would say that I had the privilege to kind of like figure out what teams I wanted to land at Google. There's so many different teams, and I wasn't going to join a team that was all men, like obviously. So I sat out teams, and then I would talk to the female engineers on the team about their experiences, and made sure not to join teams because that wasn't going to be productive for my mental health. I knew that. I have other friends who joined teams that were all men and then recruited more women, like more power to them. And the other thing was to be conscious of my mental health. Like after 2 years of just focusing on engineering and like working on my team and coding all day, I realized I was getting burnt out. And taking a step back and realizing like there are a lot of microaggressions that you just like swallow day to day, or like a lot of anxiety that you carry day to day that you have to acknowledge and take care of. I'm really lucky now. We have a team of all female engineers just for our startup. We're a team of 4 all female engineers, and it just happened to work out that way. We put up a job position, interviewed, and found the best engineers, and that happened to be all female engineers. I will say that that team looks and feels so different every day. It's just worlds apart. And like, I was like, is this how men feel every day when they walk in? Like, they just get to be cool and chill. Like, they don't have to work. Like, it makes a difference. And I realized that so starkly once I started my team. So be conscious and ask for, a place that best fits you.
Yeah, and as far as me, like I think I've just surrounded myself with more women that have the same particular interest that you have. Even though it is like it sounds like in your classroom it's very few of you. Look at other schools, look at other classes within campus or even outside of campus, or even groups like on Instagram or Facebook. I don't know if you guys do Facebook still. But just like expand your network from just your classroom, because there's a lot of other women, and here's another one that you could like reach out to and get connected, because I think that's what has helped me, just really surrounding myself. And I'm also very spiritual, so I would like read my Bible and just like scriptures to remind myself I am a daughter of God, I am good, I do belong, and I am going to do this. So that's more on a personal note.
Awesome, thanks. Does anyone else have a question? Give the mic back. Cool. Well, if no one has any questions they want to ask in front of the group, that's okay. Let's give a large round of applause for our panelists. Thank you all so much for coming. You were great. And yeah. Do you guys want to